Satan, Lucifer, Belial, Leviathan, Samael.
Welcome. This is Aleister Nacht. This is episode 3 in our Satanic Processes series. In our first episode, we talked about processes, and we talked about how we're going to explain these processes and how I'm going to take you through compiling these processes and looking at the approach I use and the individual processes themselves. And that is coming. However, in this episode, what we're going to talk about is we're going to start with the rote learning that we discussed in episode 2 and the learning process itself. And we're going to start looking at a communication medium that we use in Magnum Opus quite frequently, and it is called the witch's alphabet to most people. We call it the Theban. Now, you're probably saying, well, it looks to me like this should be called Theban. However, in our case, the H is silent. And this comes from the German language. This term has been bastardized by the different people who have read information about this, and then they take it and begin to call it whatever they want. But the proper pronunciation of this is Theban. It is the witch's alphabet, and we can see that each letter corresponds with our English alphabet. Now, that itself is a little bit different because originally these things came from the Germanic language, and their characters themselves are different. For instance, there is an S, and then in the German language there is what's called sloth S or Schloss S, and it is simply a different character, but we don't see this in the English, and this is what most people use now. However, this language is highly adaptable and highly applicable to the coven or the particular users that are going to use this as a communication medium. Now, I have this exact graphic in my book, Satanism and Devil Worship, Magnae Sapientiae Satanas, for a reason, because it is part of what we use in our coven. We use this quite a lot when we're writing out recitations, spells, incantations, and things like that to be used during ceremonial magic. There are, however, a couple of things that are not represented in this particular diagram that I have here, this illustration. And that is because there is a reason why. This is information that you're not going to find in my book, because some things I only share with those who are advancing along this path. So this is not fully for public consumption. One of the things that I'll add to this is, while we do have in this example a calligraphy for period, we also have another one for a space in between the actual words. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. We also have a signal that we use that tells the reader what direction this combination of calligraphy or characters is going to take on. Because while we are used to, in English and the Western world, I would say, we're used to left to right. However, this can be highly individualized and can not only be left to right, but it can be right to left. It can also be top to bottom or bottom to top. And so there are some indicators that we use, knowing how that is going to be communicated. And again, this diagram is actually in Satanism and devil worship. One thing that I will read in the chapter where this is located, there is also a passage that I would like to read, and this is in the chapter Tabula Rasa, and it is actually something to point out, and the reason why we use this becomes abundantly clear. So, words no longer have meaning and carry no conceivable message. All communications are carried via mediums such as images, impulses, and other inputs from the human senses. These image is extremely important, because as you are communicating and as you are recording certain things, you're absolutely not going to have words that are going to be able to bring these things together. They're going to be more of images. And the Theban allows you to formulate certain things that are not confined to just these characters. But this is where we're going to begin. So a couple of things about the language itself, or the alphabet itself. Again, it can be right to left, so it can progress right to left. It can also progress left to right. It can progress top to bottom, and it can also progress in a format of bottom to top. And there are certain things that are used to explain to the reader how this is going to be. Now, with the Theban, there is casual cover, okay? So in some cases you may actually do this just to have casual cover from other readers who do not need to know what the passage says. But you also have covert as well. And both of these together can be used, again, for those that are familiar And really, you just need casual cover in communicating, and then also for covert. Okay, so let's move on into the first symbol. As I said, we can go from left to right, top to bottom, bottom to top, right to left, either one. And people use these symbols and they highly personalize them. So while you may see a symbol just such as this, and then whatever the individual case is from here, you would know that this is going to progress from left to right. Sometimes we would just use this. Sometimes we may actually use this symbol, and it kind of symbolizes the pitchfork, so to speak. And this lets you know that this particular thing is going to proceed from left to right. The same thing is true with the reverse of that, or almost like a reverse E. This first symbol being something that would tell you that what is about to follow is actually going to be going this direction as opposed to going in this direction. So that's the first symbol, and we can use a combination of these. I'm going to use usually this symbol to let you know that we're going to proceed from left to right. Okay. Now, if it's going to go up or down, we may see that we may see this used. We may also see this used to let the reader know that now this is going to progress like this. So while you may have a couple of symbols like this, and you may have another symbol like this, if you had in the first symbol this, then you would know that this progression begins at the bottom and goes up. So this J would be your first symbol, going up the alphabet and so forth. So I hope that makes sense to you. Also, in this particular arrangement of these characters, we also have room for a space. Now, space itself is just like if we were to write a sentence, I am, what have you. We're talking about this particular space right here. So in order to do that with the Theban, you're going to have a symbol to mark that. Now, our coven, Magnum Opus, adds this symbol, which looks very much like a Z or Zeta, or a letter like that in cursive with two marks in it. This equals space. And so you may find that in a phrase it may be like this, And that lets you know that this is going to be written from right to left. And you may have a letter here like this, which may be a J. And then over here you would have this character as well. This is going to be your space in between. And again, it lets you know that what you're having from here with these characters, and perhaps you have another here, that this is to be taken from this direction. It usually starts here with the direction that we talked about, simply because if it were to come at the end of this, for the reader, you really need to try to figure out, which way this alphabet is written, or the words are written. And so this usually does not happen unless it is again coordinated ahead of time. Then obviously with your coven or your coven members, you could do this in any variation of this, and it would be fine for that either casual or covert cover in itself. So again, this is what we're looking at here, and we look at the individual letters themselves, and we kind of see what these look like. Now, something that you may find is that some of these may not look exactly the way that they do on the chart. For instance, if you look at my J here, you would find that that J doesn't look exactly like this, and that's fine. Again, each person is individual, and if you're writing with a stylus or a pencil or a pen, or you're just actually taking a shot of these on a computer and you're applying those to a certain word or letters themselves, then obviously you may find that it is just a little bit dissimilar, so to speak. So some of these things may not be exactly the same. Again, for instance, here what we find that I put a bit of a curve here, but this could just as easily be a straight line as opposed to a curve. And you might absolutely find that in the wild you may have something that is more like this, while the preceding letter may look more like this, and that's perfectly okay. I say this to say that it's going to be a little bit different in each particular case, and that this absolutely may look more like another character, such as in this case a T from the Theban. So you have to kind of be flexible with it, and you will get the hang of it. After doing it over and over and over again, you will be able to pick up on these. So again, take this, use it, become familiar with it, and I will give you some exercises to do that will help you along the way so that you can kind of decipher this information and get to the point where you can do it a little quicker. Now, there is nothing to say that you cannot use a key to do this. Okay, so like for our example, this is our key, and you could actually have this key, and then you just simply go line by line or letter by letter and write this out until it really makes sense into whatever particular sentence or word that comes together. You can certainly do that. So you don't have to memorize these. You will, again, going through our process, you will get to the point where you know these, and you will use certain ones in the construction of words and sentences. You're going to use the same ones over and over again, just as you do in the English alphabet. And so they will become more and more ingrained. Remember, as we're moving from rote forward in this, your first steps are going to be rote, and you're going to look at these and understand that, okay, I'm using this over and over again. What is it? Or especially because you're using the space over and over again, you're going to be more familiar with it as well. And so that's easily going to help you move into the understanding and the application phase of this, and then ultimately moving into the correlation of this process. So I hope that this makes sense to you. Again, if you have questions or if you have comments, you can certainly go back. This whole series is a Patreon only series, so feel free to go back to Patreon and ask those questions, and I'll be sure to address those for you. So that's it for episode 3. And if you have questions, again, be sure to ask those. Until next time, this has been Aleister Nacht. Hail Satan.